You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, episode 8. A note to my listeners, this episode comes with a trigger warning. How do you heal after child abuse? The statistics for survivors of all the various types of child abuse are staggering. One of the many things we don't talk about often enough is the fact that these children grow up to become adults. Like any other adult, survivors are expected to be normally functioning members of society. We work, date, marry, give back to our community, and perhaps even have children of our own. But when violence, neglect, or inappropriate love is all you received in your childhood, how can you go on to have a normal, loving, successful adulthood? Today we're talking about the steps my guest takes every day along her healing journey. She is Caryn Walker, a qualified life coach and counselor, author of her memoir, Tell Me Your Story, Daddy, and survivor of child abuse and rape. Caryn knows what it's like to not want to talk about her past and the revelations it took to realize that's exactly what she needed to do and wanted to do. Once she was in a place in her life when she felt secure enough to be vulnerable, had a soft place to fall, and had learned to trust her own gut instincts, she came forward. As a result, her abuser was arrested, charged, and sentenced to 16 years in prison. It took her 30 years to speak up, but she's now found her voice. She tells her story in order to help other victims find their voice. If it's one thing that we know here at Life Like You Mean It, it's that what works along your healing journey isn't a one-size-fits-all for everybody. In this episode, Caryn shares what works for her. Many of her strategies are ones that also work for me and for many of my clients. Ready to learn from a survivor herself on what steps she took and continues to take along her healing journey? We have an eye-opening discussion today that I know you don't want to miss. So let's dive right in and let you meet my friend, Caryn.
You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, where we firmly believe that you, and only you, have the power to make the changes you seek in your life. Survivor of 10 years of child abuse, Lisa Sabaniak, will help you to empower yourself to overcome your limitations in whatever form they take, to build the life you truly deserve. It's time to hear from fellow experts who know firsthand what building a successful and satisfying life because of our past experiences is like, and exactly what it takes to do it. If you're ready, willing and able to get honest with yourself, roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty with the hard work that lasting change takes, you're in the right place. Here's your host, NLP practitioner, speaker, Reiki master, author, and chipaholic, Lisa Sabaniak.
Today's episode is dedicated to Amazon Fresh. Until recently, I didn't even know that Amazon also delivered groceries. I mean, Stefan and I use Amazon for most of our regular shopping each month, so finding out that our weekly food shop could be included blew my mind. They have all my favorites, even Whole Foods Market and specialties from local shops, for at least 9% less than leading supermarkets. Same-day delivery is free for orders over £40, and you can even choose your delivery slot between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. every single day, including the same day. Honestly, this has been a game changer for us. Like everyone else, my household can be pretty chaotic between 2 stepkids, 2 chickens, 2 cats, and up to 4 dogs at any one time. It's pretty much a zoo over here. So to have the luxury of getting our food delivered to our door means I have time for other things, people, and animals in my day. And like with all great things, you can sign up for the Amazon Fresh 30-day free trial. You just need to be an Amazon Prime member. Head on over to my website, lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fresh, to get the details and sign up for your free trial today. That's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fresh. All right, and hi, Caryn. Welcome to the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Would you like to take a couple of seconds and introduce yourself to everybody?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I really do appreciate you've given me this opportunity. My name's Caryn Walker. I'm 48 years old. I live on Merseyside in the United Kingdom. So I'm not quite sure where you are. I can't remember, sorry. Soon to be moving to Turkey the end of this month. So that's in the next adventure the next chapter in my book of life.
That's so exciting. I'm actually Canadian, but I'm here in the UK as well. I moved here about 6 years ago. So that's so exciting. I've been to a very small area of Turkey, just on a family holiday as part of the kind of cruise. We stopped there. That's so amazing that you're picking up your life and moving to Turkey.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And other than my animals' paperwork, everything's ready to go, good and in place.
That's so amazing. So this has been a dream of yours for quite some time, I imagine?
I did live in Turkey for a few years before my book came out, and I was back in England to concentrate on it for a while, promoting it and being here and doing interviews and things. But my heart is in Turkey and I can't wait to go back.
Oh, that is so exciting. So you brought up the book. Why don't we go ahead and talk about that now? So what is the title of it? When did it come out? And give us a little bit of background information.
I wrote my memoir with the help of a ghostwriter who lives in Aberdeen, Linda. In 2011 it came out, and it's my life story, and it's called Tell Me You're Sorry, Daddy. So I wrote my life story after my background is one of abuse as a child, at the hands of my parents, physically, emotionally, and sexually as well. And in 2011, after bumping into my father after 15 years plus in my grandmother's nursing home, I realised that I didn't know where he lived and whether he had access to children. And I'd always believed I didn't have the strength inside to report what had happened to me. But when I saw him and those things came to mind, like where do you live, who have you got access to, are you hurting somebody else, then I knew I had to report it, and I did. It took a few days of going to the police station and sitting outside, but eventually I went in and I reported it. So in 2011, I had to go through a trial with him because he pleaded not guilty to 24 counts that he was charged with, but he was found guilty unanimously on every count by a jury, and he went to prison for 16 years. He's actually applying for parole this summer, and his parole hearing is in November, so I'm not sure whether he's out soon or not.
Wow.
After the trial, I spoke with a lady, the ghostwriter I used actually, Linda Watson-Brown. During the trial, in the lead up to it, I'd gone away for a few days because the pressure. People ask me all the time, should I report? And it's a personal decision, and I do believe you should. The first step in healing is talking about what's happened to you, whether that's to your best friend or a family member or a police officer. I really do believe it's not for everybody, but if you can do it, you should do it. And in that year, though, I don't lie to people. I tell them this is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And that year leading up to his trial was full of so many things that went wrong and emotionally draining. My hair fell out, I got sick, and I went away for a few days on my own, didn't take a phone, but somebody had said to me, pick up somebody else's survivor story because it can help. So on the way to the airport, I picked up a book in Asda and I took it with me, and I spent the 5 days literally sitting on a hotel balcony reading this lady's story again and again and writing things down that helped me to remember and understand and make sense of. And it was the first time in 40 years, because I was 40 at the time, that I realised that my father was a paedophile. Before that, I thought it was just my reality, what had happened as a child. But it helped so much that when I came back, I emailed the address at the back of the book and asked the ghostwriter to contact the lady whose story she'd written and thank her for writing her story. because it helped me so much. And that's how I got talking to the ghostwriter. So after the trial, she asked me would I write my own, and I said no, because it just felt such a scary prospect to.
Yeah.
It was hard enough to go to court, but to put it out there on a paper for people to read. But then over the next 2 years, I kept hearing stories of people who'd taken secrets like this to their grave, or they'd spoken on their deathbed because it's a secret that you can't bury with you. And that broke my heart to realise it was taking away every single day of some people's lives, and that was just not right. So I decided it would be helpful to other people to write my story, and that's why I did it.
That's absolutely incredible. All of it is incredible. And being a survivor of 10 years of child abuse myself, and just filing my sexual assault report back in last October, so October of 2018. And my abuser is now going through the court system, and looks like he's going to plead not guilty, but not entirely sure yet. I can empathize with you for, what position you must have been in getting ready for that trial. And so I think you've talked about a couple of things that I'd like to go back to, which is, first of all, we've got this huge Me Too movement, and we've got this huge Why I Didn't Report movement that is excellent on one hand, because it really gives a voice to women, and it really allows the rest of society that this hasn't happened to realize just how big of an issue this really is, and that it is happening on your street, maybe even in your home. But for some women and men, I imagine as well, if they're not ready to report, or if they don't feel like that is their path, it can also put a lot of pressure onto them and make them feel perhaps even guilty for not filing their report. And I think you really hit on that a little bit, to be able to touch that, it's not necessarily the right thing for everyone, but if it is the right thing for you, do it.
I absolutely agree. And there was a person in my life that knew about it and had made me feel guilty almost my whole adult life for not reporting.
Wow.
But until it was right for me, I couldn't. I carried that extra burden of guilt as well.
Yeah.
I was basically led to believe that, if you're doing it to somebody else, it could be your fault because you haven't said anything, and that's so unhelpful and so wrong and on every level. But I really believed in my heart, no, I'm not strong enough for this, until I was.
Yes.
And that's okay. You cannot be one day and then you are the next day. And I've come up with my own theory on why it takes people. On average, I think it's 23 years it takes people to tell. But it can take 40 years, it can take 50 years, it can take a lifetime. And I believe you have to be. It's such a damaging thing. It damages your soul, your mind, emotionally. It changes you forever. And I believe that the reason people wait, I'd like this to be a bit more public, to reassure people that it's okay, that you're not ready to tell. And when they're saying why do people wait, they shouldn't be made to feel guilty for that. As I was saying, I believe it's because you have to be at a point in your life where you're secure enough inside yourself to allow yourself to be vulnerable for a while, because you are so vulnerable once you've opened that can up.
Yes.
And everything it brings, victim blaming, you lose family, the whole court process, the dealing with emotions, when you first tell, it literally feels like you're having to pull words from the back of your throat because you thought you'd never say them words, and then you are. And I think to be that vulnerable for a while, you've got to be at the right place in your life.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now, I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. How did you know that you were at that place, that you knew that you were secure enough to allow yourself to be vulnerable?
Well, my first relationship was an abusive one as an adult, which I believe is quite common with child abuse survivors. They end up in abusive relationships, and my life wasn't very good for 9 years. And then he came back into my life when he got married, and because my brothers didn't know, my father did. Because my brothers didn't know what had happened, they were all happy and, oh, our dad's back in our life, and I carried on playing the role.
Right.
I describe this in my book. To the outside, it looks as though we were this little happy family, but the reality of it for me was completely different. I was living my life like a military operation, like I did as a child. I would only visit when my grandma visited. I would sleep in bed with grandma, and if she left the house, I would leave the house. I wouldn't leave him with my son. There were so many things that no one else could see that I was dealing with. So that time wasn't right either. But then after 2 years of that, I couldn't emotionally take anymore and backed away. I think then from then, and then I got into another relationship a couple of years later, which was a stable relationship. And then my life started to feel a little bit more secure. And I think by the time when I saw him and in the nursing home, I was in that better place, and I was able to have that soft place to fall when I needed it, which was my partner. And you really do need that. I think I'm sure there's many people who've reported and they've coped. It's just my theory on it about being secure and a reason why people don't tell, when they're younger.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, you and I don't know each other, and we've not talked about this ahead of time. And so when I said I know the answer to this question, because essentially what you're saying is that you'll know when it's right for you. And that might be certain things that you need. It might be certain things that you don't even realize that you would need in that moment, right? For me, it was the why I didn't report campaign that was going on Twitter. And I decided to join that and to post out a tweet with the hashtag why I didn't report every single day, which I did for about 16 days. So I had 16 reasons for why I didn't report. And on the last day that I was putting it, I realized that that wasn't me anymore. None of those reasons were me anymore. Right? I didn't have to live in fear anymore. I didn't feel the shame anymore. All of the different, nobody would believe me. I don't really care if nobody believed me anymore. Right? Sure. Yeah, there's going to be people that don't believe me, of course. And it might lead to a trial that I might have to try to prove almost the improvable, right? How do you prove what happens behind closed doors, right? It's specifically happening behind closed doors, so it can't be proven. But all of a sudden, I just had the strength that I never had before. And part of it was I don't care if nobody believes me. This isn't about what other people think about me. It's about me. And I am finally in a place where I'm strong enough to put me first. And you can't describe that feeling, right? You can't describe that moment.
It just happens. And I'd like that to be a reassuring conversation that we're having for anybody who feels that they never will or they're not ready. It's okay.
Yep.
When you're ready. This is your journey. And if your perpetrator is hurting somebody else, that's his responsibility, not yours.
Exactly. That's exactly it. When you said that about feeling like that person in your life, whoever that was, shame on them for actually saying those words to you, that it would be on you. And let's be clear, the only person who is to blame for any heinous act on a child or anybody who has said no is the person committing the crime, not anybody else. Nobody else is to fault, right? I would say that to, my mom, when she found out about what was happening, she literally had no idea of what was going on, and she was not abusive in any way, shape, or form. And, she obviously has huge guilt. She blames herself for it happening. It's like, Mom, you didn't do anything. And she'd say, yes, but I chose him. I put him in our lives. So yeah, but you didn't make him walk in that door at night. You didn't make him treat me like that, right? Nobody else could. That is on him. And that is the only person to blame, ever. This is the perfect spot to take a quick break to talk about Amazon Fresh. If you're a Prime member, then you can now purchase your food shop from Amazon Fresh and have them deliver it the same day for free if your order is over £40. Do you like specialty items from local shops or Whole Foods market items? No problem. Amazon Fresh has you covered, all costing 9% less than your leading supermarket. You can get your free 30-day trial by heading to my website, lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fresh. That's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fresh. This link can also be found in the show notes. Anytime you are looking to make changes in your life, you need one thing to ensure you can pull it off: consistency. Of course, you need to have a clear target of what you are striving for and a plan to implement, but without consistency, you're dead in the water. That's because it takes 21 to 66 days to change a habit. And that's really what we're talking about here. Changing your habit of a self-defeating, disempowering mindset to one of empowerment that serves your highest good. That's why my guide includes a workbook. I've designed it to support you in the work that you need to do to make the changes you are seeking. Sitting down each day to complete a task develops new habits. So if you're tired of coming up with a game plan only to be disappointed at never reaching it, and you're excited to explore the possibility that it might be the conversation in your own head that's holding you back, then this 4-pound guide with workbook is the perfect solution to empower you to shift your mindset and start building the life you truly deserve. Get yours at lifelikeyoumeanit.com/mindset. Again, that's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/mindset. This link will also be available in the show notes.
That's right. Full stop. I'm so happy that your mum is that kind of lady, though, and I hope that she puts this behind her and accepts that she's not to blame.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And I know that there are so many other listeners that, because, I'm also, I know that you're a life coach and a counselor, and we'll get into that in a second. I'm also an NLP practitioner, and I work a lot with people who have survived abuse and trauma. And so I know that I am actually one of the very lucky ones that had a very supportive, loving mom who, because I had that, I always knew what was going on behind closed doors was wrong. There was never any moment where I thought that that was just how a stepdad is supposed to treat their stepchild, or, there was never that, because I had normalcy in part of my life and then this horrible abnormalcy in this other part of my life. And I know a lot of other people who, unfortunately, either the other parent wasn't around or the other parent was complicit in some way, shape, or form. And I can't even imagine what that is like to try to get over that. I know how hard it was to get over and to overcome the obstacles that I faced because of the abuse from one person. I can't imagine overcoming from abuse coming from different people.
I think it alters your mind. I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD, and I think a part of the reason is my mother's role in all of this, because she was all those things you've just said, and didn't protect me. She blamed me rather than him as a child, and I think, gosh, yeah, I sometimes like daydream and imagine having a mum that would have been there in that warm place and that love, that nurturing, when the truth for me was there was no warm place, there was no hug ever as a child, there was no I love you, there was no getting tucked up in bed or walk to the park, no getting told you're a princess, and there was nothing zilch at all from either of them other than the abuse, which messed my head up even more, because then a child needs and deserves and to be emotionally healthy needs some form of affection, and when the affection is the only affection you get is wrapped up in abuse, that's a tough pill to swallow when you're older, to try and straighten your head out.
Well, it's very, very confusing as a child, right? Like, it's all well and good to look back now as an adult with the things that you know and whatnot, but we've always got to remind ourselves that when we were children, we had a very limited view of the world. We didn't have a great understanding of other things. The only thing that we knew was what we saw in our own households and in our friends' households, right? And so, yeah, if you didn't have a lot of different friends because you weren't allowed to go out, for example, and play at other people's houses, then you have a very, very isolated view of the world, and you're not going to discover just how abnormal your lifestyle was until you're much older.
That's right. You're absolutely spot on. I was isolated from my grandparents and told really, really, really nasty things about them that they'd done. So any form of support I may have had, or any form of an outlet to tell somebody, was taken away because I believed that they were abusive people too, and bad
Right.
people. And my world was really small.
Yeah. So now you have a son, right, who's 30 years old. So what was that like? Because I don't think there's a lot of people that talk about an abuse survivor adding a child into their life. I don't think there's enough openness about that, because there's all kinds of statistics about how, if you're abused, you're more likely to abuse. You're more likely to get into drugs and alcohol and, have a more risky lifestyle and all of these types of things, which is part of the shame that we end up feeling. And I believe part of the reason why we don't step forward and speak our truth, whether that's at a trial type setting or whether that's just with our friends and our closest, loved ones, because there are all these statistics out there, and they're just numbers on a page as far as I'm concerned. For me, I know that when I was in my late teens and I would think about having a family, I knew that I wasn't going to abuse my child, but I couldn't help but feel that anybody that knew that I had come from an abusive home, especially how I was abused, I couldn't help but feel that they would judge me and assume that I would then be doing the same atrocities to my child. And there was probably a part of me that was afraid, what if the statistics are right? What if I end up having a child and I become some monster? Is that possible? I'm a normal, loving, decent human being now, but what if I have a child? I don't know how to discipline a child properly, for example, because I was beaten, not disciplined properly, right? So did you have any of that when you ended up becoming pregnant with your son? Did you worry or think about it at all?
When I first had him, I was only 17. I could have just written down everything you've just said as if it was coming from me. I think those feelings must be so normal.
Yeah.
But when I had him, I remember I was with this older partner who was abusive, and I don't ever remember having a voice back then. It was something that happened. Nobody ever asked me, what are my options, or what do I want? And I was having this baby, and there was no doctor's appointments. I wasn't allowed to go to antenatal, and it just was the same as everything in my life. I just put up and shut up, and this child came along. But when he was born, I was on my own with him that first night in the hospital, and he was in this little glass cot. And it was 1989. And I remember looking in his little cot and thinking, I don't know how to love you. I don't know what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to feel, and I don't know how to love you. And I put my hand in the cot and held his hand. And I thought, no, you are going to learn. He made me learn how to love. And then that was how I comforted him for the next 8 years, until it became embarrassing for him. I would hold his hand and it would always comfort him. And I told him I loved him every single day. And if it wasn't for having that child, I didn't know how to love. I didn't know how to give affection. I couldn't hug anybody. I couldn't accept a touch on the arm. There was so many things that was wrong. But then one thing I wasn't ready for, which you're absolutely right, the first issue was I wouldn't let anybody else near him. No one else, even his father, was allowed to change him or bath him, and I was absolutely terrified. And I used to think, goodness me, thank God he's not a girl, because it's bad enough protecting this boy. But if I'd had a girl, what would that have been like? And that was the first problem. But then as I got older, I got friends, and then they had children, And that was when what you talked about came in. I didn't know the boundaries, and my friends would say, "Will you change my daughter?" And I was like, "Oh, I can't change. I can't change somebody's child. What if they're thinking that I'm doing something wrong, or am I doing something wrong? Is it appropriate to put your friend's child in the bath?" All the boundaries were completely skewed, and it's heartbreaking to look back on it now, and it hasn't gone from my life completely, because it is there in the back of my mind, but I'm able to talk myself through it now. And these friends you've got and your godchildren, they're giving them to you and saying, "Go and bath my child and put her to bed and go and read her a story," and they're not thinking them things, but I have to constantly tell myself, no, this is in your head, and this is because of what happened to you. And unfortunately, the media put those statistics out there. If you've been abused, you're going to go on to abuse. And then it's in people's minds. I've had people say to me, "But it's true, isn't it?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no, it isn't. No, it isn't true." You know how that feels. And you wouldn't put that on another child. The media mix it. They say, "Oh, 97% of people who have abused go on to abuse," when the truth is 97% of people who've been abused don't go on to abuse. But there is apparently quite a high number of people who are doing it have been, if that makes sense. It sort of allows the media to manipulate that, and then they're not thinking of people like myself and you, who are trying to have a normal life and raise children and be good godparents and aunties. And it's something else that's taken away from you. That peace of mind is forever not there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, obviously abuse is a very broad term, and there's lots of different things that fall under the category of abuse. And, you've mentioned three of them, with the emotional, the physical, and the sexual. But there's also neglect and all kinds of other types of abuse as well. And I think that people who are raised in angry homes, where the communication is either non-existent or just screaming, there's no real open dialogue. I think that, because that was definitely in my case as well with my abuser. I think that definitely that has an impact on your style of communicating through, in my case, through my teen years. But if you're astute, if you're aware of your surroundings, and you realize that other people don't speak like that, and other people don't put other people down when they're talking to them and scream at them, and when I'm watching the television, they're having normal, quiet, loving conversations, that there's other ways to communicate. Once you have that sense of awareness, which sometimes that just takes a little bit of age and maturity, doesn't it? That you start to realize, okay, I want to develop that skill. I don't have it because I wasn't grown up in a house that, afforded me that opportunity, but I would like to develop that skill. And that's exactly what you do. You start to mimic that behavior until it becomes an actual skill and it becomes second nature. And then that is the way that you communicate. And that's the same way with physical violence. When I was in my early teens, that's how, when I would get angry and upset and so frustrated, I just wanted to punch something, push something, do something physical, because that's what was done to me all of my formidable years, right? That's the only way that I knew how, until, again, I started noticing that other people don't do that. And so maybe that's not the accepted thing to do. I would like to learn this new skill of how to channel that energy into something else. And so it's the same type of thing, right? And I think when it comes to something like what you're talking about, with the not having any real affection and having the only affection being in the sexual type of way, then you are absolutely adamant that that is not going to be your child's life, that they're going to know what love is. They're going to know what it's like to be safe in their own home. And I don't think people understand that people that, like us, that have come from that sort of background, do absolutely everything in our power to make sure that we break the cycle right here.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And it's such an awful, damaging myth for somebody who's already trying to fight those prejudices and deal with their own demons in their head, to have that lumped on top as well.
Exactly. Now, what types of things have you done? What steps have you taken along your healing journey to get to the point where you are now? Because you're a life coach and a counselor, so you're helping other people as well as helping yourself, because you and I both know this is a never-ending journey. We're never going to hit a destination here. This is a lifelong journey. So what steps have you taken that have worked for you?
One of the biggest steps, I didn't know it at the time, but it was actually telling. That was the first step in my recovery, but I didn't know at the time. It's only when now I look back, I'm a different person to what I was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And also going non-contact with toxic family members.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a really helpful step, because I was never allowed to develop my personality when I was involved with the toxic members, and always made to feel responsible and guilty and not quite good enough.
Yeah. So what about that mindset, that voice in your head that tells you that you're not good enough? What do you do to try to not let that voice win?
Truthfully, it isn't always successful, because I do still struggle with self-esteem and that voice in your head. Like you said, my core beliefs are so set and deep that I have to consciously talk to myself and use grounding techniques and try and rewrite what's going on in my mind, because the core beliefs developed as a child are sometimes so deep, and it's so difficult to change them, and it's your default, and it feels familiar, and it's okay to criticize yourself. One of the most helpful things I ever did was a small course on self-compassion.
Right.
And it was the simplest thing to do, and it was basically, take a scenario, a really horrible situation you can remember from childhood, and that's happened to somebody you know. How would you talk to that person about it? And you have to write it all down. And then the next step is, how would you talk to a child who's going through this? And then you write it all down. And then the last one is, how did you talk to yourself in your head? And you write it all down. And when you go back and read the three differences, it's incredible. You're empathic and gentle and kind to the person that it's happening to, and you want to help them and make them understand that it's not their fault. And then when you go along to the child, that's tenfold, and you just want to take them out and hug them, and then and make it all better for them and take them away from the situation. And when you come to read what you've said to yourself in your head, it's like, wow, you're blaming yourself for something that happened to you that was out of your control. Why are you being so uncompassionate to yourself when you're compassionate to everybody else? And it was a really important lesson that I learned then. And now when I'm talking bad about myself to myself, I catch it and think, oh yeah, would you say that to your friend who went through the same thing? Or if you make a mistake, if your friend bumped their car or dropped the bottle of wine outside the supermarket, would you call her really bad names and say you're just a stupid idiot and you never get anything right? Then of course you wouldn't. You'd be saying, it's just a bottle of wine, let's go get another one. Or you didn't come out thinking you're going to have an accident in your car, and these things happen. But you talk to yourself so differently. That's a good thing to work on.
That is absolutely brilliant and so well put, because that is absolutely true. And I'm sure there are so many people listening right now that are thinking, oh my God, she is right. Like, honestly, you could take any situation at all. Like you said, accidentally dropping a bottle of wine, all the way to, a relationship breakdown or anything, just pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, and that immediate response that you get of, I can't do it, I'm not good enough for that. But, that type of thing. And you think, just picture your best friend or your child, your loved one, your partner, somebody coming to you with that exact same idea or any idea that they seem to be excited about, even if it's only for a split second. Would you tear them down? Of course you wouldn't, right? It's really eye-opening the way that we speak to ourselves. And I think I always hold really close to my heart, the belief that that is where it all begins. Our healing journey has to start with really recognizing and being honest with ourselves about how we really feel about ourselves and our place in this world. And once we can actually be honest and have an open conversation with what that language is we use for ourselves, then we can finally start to make some changes. But if you're walking around and you're thinking, oh, no, I'm always really good to myself, I treat myself really well, you're never going to be able to make the changes that you need to make until you're able to really look in that mirror and realize you're the first one to put yourself down. You're the first one to tell yourself you can't do it, that you're stupid for even thinking about doing it. Right? It doesn't matter where those thoughts come from. It doesn't matter if they come from an abusive past or, just some people are just born, it seems, with lack of self-esteem, lack of self-confidence. Some people haven't had a terrible childhood like you or I have had. They've grown up in a loving, supportive environment, and they still will use that language to themselves. So it doesn't matter what the reason is for it being there. What matters is that you recognize that it's there and own it.
Yeah, 100%.
So you are a life coach and a counselor. How can people find you to learn more about what you do and how you might be able to help them?
I have a website, and it's under my name. And because I'm moving away, I'm going to focus on online counselling, either by Skype or email chat or live chat or what we're doing now. I think that's the way forward for a lot of people now who can't get out to appointments or they don't want to do it face to face. So I'm hoping that works for me.
And your book is also available on Amazon in any country. So people can just search either Tell Me Your Story, Daddy, or Caryn Walker on Amazon and find your book. And they can also go to carynwalker.com, is it?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being a guest today and being open and honest with not only your abusive past, but with the issues that stem from that abusive past. It's really important, I think, that we openly discuss these things so that other people know that they're not alone and they're not the only ones, and that years later, we're still struggling with the aftermath of what we went through as kids. And that is normal. But it's also normal to be able to push through and build a life that you truly deserve, even when you come from an abusive past. So thank you so much, Caryn, for being with us today.
You're welcome. I just wanted to say, I know we're conditioned, if you do come from an abusive background, you're conditioned to not talk and not tell. But it's so important. I now know the importance of sharing your story, and it's not attention seeking, and it's not for any other reason than it's helping other people talk and share your story. It's okay. It's your journey and it's your story, and it's okay to tell.
Perfectly said. What an interesting conversation. I am so happy that we had the chance to meet Caryn, hear her story, learn the steps she takes in her healing journey, and all the important aspects of surviving child abuse we spoke about. The Why I Didn't Report movement that took Twitter by storm in 2018, along with the Me Too movement that hit the year before, are great examples of how we are raising awareness and providing a platform for survivors to be heard. That doesn't mean that everyone will find it is right for them to directly speak up, but at least the microphone is turned on. The part of the conversation I enjoyed the most, aside from Caryn's steps to healing, surrounds how the statistics may be doing more to hinder and shame us than to help us. I love Caryn's question. Is it 95% of those who were abused go on to abuse? Or that 95% of abusers were abused? That's an incredibly large and important difference, don't you think? Let's end this episode with a recap of Caryn's healing journey tips. First, speak out, whether to a friend, a therapist, or a room full of people. Second, break contact with all toxic people, including family members if that's the case. You've had enough toxicity in your life. Third, consciously talk to yourself and find how to ground yourself to shift your mindset. Fourth, Challenge all the beliefs you have that are weighing you down. Start with all the language you use towards yourself in your own head. Fifth, look into self-compassion. Caryn took an actual course on this, so that may also be an interest to you. Self-compassion is basically when you think of how you'd respond both externally and internally to a loved one going through whatever it is you're going through, to a child, and then to yourself. You might just shock yourself at how hard you are being on yourself, especially in comparison to how you'd speak or even think about the exact same thing happening to another. This might then need to be fed back to step 4, challenge your beliefs. Thank you so much to my guest today, Caryn Walker, for having such a powerful conversation with us today. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Now go do something nice for yourself today. You deserve it.
Thanks for listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Head on over to the show notes for this episode and all past episodes at www.lifelikeyoumeanit.com/blog. If you love the show, leave a rating and review. Share that love by spreading the word. Post a link to your social media. Share it with your friends and follow or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast hosting site. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, remember to live your life on purpose by living life like you mean it.